They say that dogs don't feel loneliness, that they live in the moment, that they forget, that they move on. But they're wrong, because if you stood there, if you heard his cries, you'd know. Some dogs never stop waiting. Some dogs never forget. And this was one of those dogs. He was not the first to show up at the shelter, and he wouldn't be the last. Story comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. But there was something different about him. Other dogs wagged their tails when people walked by. They jumped, barked, begged for attention. But him, he just watched from the shadows, silent, to wait for someone who would not return. The workers referred to him as Charlie. Nobody knew where he had come from. No one knew his story, just that he was found, alone, cold, shaking, buried in dirt and scars no one could read, but still able to stand. And since the day he arrived, he hadn't wagged his tail, not once. The first night, they figured he was simply scared. The second, they hoped he'd get used to it. By the third, they were beginning to worry, because every single night, no matter how tired he was, even as the room became darker, he would cry. Soft at first, then louder. It was a keening, sorrowful sound that echoed through the shelter like a ghost that would not move on. He wasn't just lonely, he was mourning. The other dogs moved on. They got adopted. They found homes. But Charlie watched them go, one by one, until there was no one left but him. Workers have done everything they can. They gave him extra food. They sat next to his cage and whispered soft words. They attempted to prove to him that life hadn't ended. But it didn't matter, because Charlie was not waiting for kindness. He was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. And in his heart, he already knew it. They say dogs forget, that they don't linger on the past, that they live in the moment. But if that were true, and if Charlie was waiting, why did he wait? Why did he still cry? Why weeks, months in this shelter after? Had his heart never let go? The shelter workers noticed. They tried. Every day they tried. One was there every morning. Her name was Maggie, and she was a tired-eyed young woman with a heart of gold who knelt on the mud beside his cage. She whispered to him, told him he was a good boy, told him that someday someone would come, that someone would see him, that someone would love him. But Charlie didn't take her word for it. Not anymore. He had seen too many people walk by his cage. People who stopped. People who smiled. People who said, "Oh, what a beautiful dog." But never him. Never for him. Next, they turned to the younger ones, the playful ones, those that wiggled their tails and leaped around. Charlie didn't do that, because Charlie knew better, because hope was more painful than being invisible. So he didn't try. He just watched them leave, until today, until the door opened the moment. Charlie doesn't raise his head. He doesn't care. Why should he? It's just another person, another stranger, another one who looks right over him. The man shyly comes closer. Maggie flashes him a welcoming smile, but she eyes him critically. "Good morning," she greets. "Looking to adopt?" A man exhales, as if the question is a weightier burden than it should be. "I don't know," he admits. Maggie tilts her head. "Well, I can give you a tour." He nods, pulls a hand through his hair like he's trying to get his thoughts together. I lost my dog some time ago," he says, now quieter. "I wasn't going to get another one, but..." His sentence disappears into silence. But Maggie understands. She's seen it before. That hesitation, that fear. It's not like people show up only to see dogs. Sometimes they return to retrieve something they buried, something that they aren't even aware that they seek. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they find it. She walks him down the aisles, rows of wagging tails, excited barks, dogs leaning against their cages, eager, hopeful. But the man, he doesn't stop, doesn't react, until Maggie points to the very last cage. He's been here the longest. The man looks, and for the first time since entering the room, he stops. Some bonds, they say, can never be broken, and time can't make untrue what's still true, that sometimes, even in a world of strangers, you locate someone who knew you back then. And so I sat in front of this trembling dog in a cold shelter cage. I couldn't help but feel that somehow we had met before. Maggie stands off to the side with crossed arms, her expression gentle and knowing. She has witnessed the arrival and departure of many people, have observed numerous dogs awarded a second opportunity. But this moment feels different. She takes a step forward, lowering her voice, as though speaking too loudly could break the spell. "He doesn't look at people like that," she murmurs. The man swallows hard. His eyes dart to her and back to Charlie. He studies him closer now, the way his ribs show through his thin fur slightly, the heaviness of his coat, the tiredness in his sunken eyes, the way the ears twitch a bit, not in curiosity, but in recognition. A familiar pain rises up in his chest. It feels too real, too raw, like grief, like loss. 如痛，他想忘掉的东西. He forces himself to breathe. He's been here a long time? Maggie nods and kneels beside him. Almost a year? The man frowns. A year? She sighs. No one wants a dog like him. He doesn't wag his tail. When people walk in, he doesn't get excited. It's like... She pauses, measuring her words. It's as if he's waiting for something. The words strike harder than they ought. The man clenches his jaw. He doesn't know why his arms are cold, why his pulse has picked up, why this dog, this brittle, broken dog, seems to be like something from an era he can't quite remember. When he eventually speaks, his voice is hoarse. What happened to him? Maggie shifts slightly and then looks at Charlie with the kind of sorrow that only someone who's witnessed too much loss can bear. No one really knows for sure, she admits. We found him after a storm, alone. No collar, no microchip. He was scared. More than scared. He wouldn't allow anyone to be close to him for weeks. The man exhales sharply. Something about the thought of this dog, of this small, defenseless creature, being abandoned is painful to him. Alone. Terrified. Waiting for the one who did not arrive. Maggie goes on, her voice low. It was the first few weeks that were the worst. He barely ate. He kept to himself and didn't bother the other dogs. And at night, she stops, looking at Charlie with a face of profound sadness. At night, he cried. The man's stomach tightens. Cried? Maggie nods. Every single night. The man's throat goes dry. Does he still? A beat of silence. Then, Maggie nods again. He looks back at Charlie, at those haunted eyes, at the way his body is curled up so tightly, as if bracing itself for the inevitable disappointment. Something shifts inside him. A memory. A glimpse of something he can't really understand. It hurts. And suddenly, it all makes sense. He gulps, and his voice is almost a whisper. I think I know him. They say memories fade. That time erases the pain, that if you forget something long enough, it disappears. But some memories, some never leave. They just sit there, suffocated under years of silence, and holding dour the waves of the set. And tonight, it was rising. The noise in the shelter hums in the distance. Some janitor somewhere down the hallway is talking. Once in a while, a dog barks, echoing as background noise. But to the man and the dog, the world has gone quiet. Because this moment is the only moment that exists. This inexplicable familiarity between the two of them. Maggie takes a tentative step forward. You said, you think you know the guy? Her voice is careful, gentle, as though she's scared if she speaks too loud. This fragile connection will break. The man swallows hard. He stops, because the words feel wrong. Not only does he think he knows this dog, it's something deeper than that. Something deeper, something he feels, as if an old sore was being torn open. Charlie doesn't blink, doesn't look away, like it's finally time for this moment, as if he knows. And suddenly, a flash of something, a memory, a house, a backyard, a dash of gold through the grass reading, laughter, a voice, his voice. Come here, boy. A name at the tip of his tongue, just out of reach. He inhales sharply. The memory vanishes, gone as fast as it appeared. Maggie watches him carefully. She's seen hesitation before, understood the way people analyze their own emotions when they're standing next to a dog that needs saving. But this is something else. This man isn't holding back because he's not sure, and he's hesitating because something in him is breaking, because he knows the truth on some level, even if he can't say it yet. The man exhales slowly, then he carefully, almost fearfully, extends his hand toward the cage. Charlie doesn't flinch, doesn't retreat, he just watches. And then he moves. The first time since arriving at the shelter that he has Charlie lifts his frail body. It's slow, painful. Like he's been lying down so long he's forgot how to stand. His thin fur draws taut over his ribs. His legs tremble, but he stands. And then he takes a step forward, just one. But it's enough, Maggie gasps, because this dog that had curled up in the same place for months, the dog who never got up when guests arrived, you just took a step toward this man, and for the first time in a year, Charlie's tail twitches, not a full wag, not excitement, a tiny, almost imperceptible move, like his body is recalling something his heart never forgot. The man's breath hitches. His fingers curl into the metal bars, knuckles pale. He should say something. He should move. But he can't, because for the first time since arriving at this shelter, for the first time since peering into Charlie's eyes, he's afraid, not of the dog, not of adopting him, but of the truth. Because deep inside, under every year, under every buried memory, he knows. He just doesn't know whether he's ready to say it. Time, they say, heals all wounds. That, over time, the past wanes. But that's a lie. Because some wounds, some never heal, some never fade. They just sit there, buried beneath the surface, hoping the mouths will be finally dug up. Maggie looks now between the man and the dog, unsettled. She's witnessed hundreds of adoptions, where people who walk in, fall in love with a dog, fill out the paperwork, and walk out with a new best friend. But this isn't an adoption. This is a reunion, even if the man himself doesn't yet fully realize it. She clears her throat. As I've said before, we don't know much. The man doesn't budge, doesn't peel his eyes off Charlie. But we do know he wasn't always a stray. A pause. Maggie exhales, folding her arms. When we got to him, he was wearing a collar. The man's breath catches. A collar. Where is it? His voice is tight, urgent. Maggie hesitates. It was damaged, torn, actually. She exhales, but there was something stuck onto them. A rusted metal tag. The name was nearly illegible. The world tilts slightly. The man tightens his grip on the bars. Charlie hasn't shifted, hasn't blinked, hasn't breathed any louder than a whisper. He's waiting, listening, because this is not just a story about him. This is a story about the ghost of who he was. The man swallows hard. What did it say? Maggie looks hesitant now, as if speaking the name will make something concrete and irrevocable. She pivots, strides toward a filing cabinet in the back of the room. The man tracks her every move, pulse thundering in his chest. She digs through a folder of papers, shuffling through some before pulling out a small, clear plastic bag. Inside, a faded, rusted name tag, worn down by time, by neglect, by loss. She makes the move, putting the bag in his trembling hands. His gaze flits across the decaying letters. Some are completely gone, but there's enough left for him to notice, to read it. His stomach drops. The air leaves his lungs. The letters are not precisely clear, but they don't have to be, because in his heart, he already knew. C-H-A-R. H-A-R-E. His throat tightens. His heart crashes against his ribs. He couldn't notice a thing outside of him, because this name, this was not the name of a stray. It wasn't just a coincidence. This was his dog, his Charlie. The man takes a gasp through unsteady lips. No, it couldn't be. It's been over a year. Charlie was gone, lost, and he'd held himself responsible for every minute of it, for not looking harder, for giving up too soon, for allowing the world to tell him that sometimes dogs just don't come back. But Charlie did. Charlie came back. Charlie survived. And for 365 nights he cried. For 365 nights he waited. And now, after all that time, he was staring at the one person who never should have left him behind. The man staggers back. His hands shake as he clutches the name tag. His breathing is shallow, erratic. His vision blurs, because he remembers now the backyard, the laughter, the golden fur glinting in the sunlight, the storm, the fear, the desperate weeks-long search, the frustration when every road went nowhere, the grief, the acceptance, the lie he told himself. This Charlie was gone for good, and the whole time Charlie had been waiting, alone, crying for him. His knees buckle, but he does not go down. Maggie doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. The truth is engraved on his face. A storm within him has cracked open, and for the first time in a long, long time, he lets it. They say dogs forgive, that they love you unconditionally no matter what. But what happens when some wounds cut too deep? What if there were some things, only a few, some good things, that once broken, never able to be put back together again? And kneeling before Charlie's cage, I didn't know which answer scared me more. Maggie is watching. She isn't saying a word. She doesn't need to, because she understands. She's watched people leave dogs behind in the past. She's seen the way they cry. She has witnessed the damage it has wrought. And she's noticed the ones that never get better. Charlie doesn't move. His body is gaunt but vertical, still barely upright. His tail doesn't wag. He doesn't spring forward with excitement. He just stares. And for the very first time since the day I arrived at this shelter, I realize something. I am not alone in remembering. Charlie does too. I grip the name tag tighter. He recognizes me. I can see it, I can feel it. But the way he's looking at me, it's not joy, it's not excitement. It's something else, something deeper, something that causes me to feel sick to my stomach. It's hesitation, it's fear. A sharp pain pierces my chest. Because I know what that look is saying. It means he hasn't forgotten. But it also means he has not forgotten the feeling of being left behind. I swallow hard and try to find my voice. Charlie. The name tastes foreign in my mouth, like I'm not entitled to say it anymore, like I'd lost the right to call him mine. Charlie's ears twitch. His body sways slightly. I can tell he's weak. Too many nights spent without a home, too many days and nights without someone to love him. And yet, he's still standing. He's still looking at me, like he's hoping this is real, like he actually wants to believe this time. I won't leave him again. Maggie leans next to me, her voice quiet. He's been through a lot. I don't look at her. I can't. I already know. I already feel it. She exhales. There are some dogs that come in here broken, but they heal. They learn to trust again. She hesitates. But Charlie, he never did. Her words sliced into me like a knife. He wouldn't eat at first, she goes on, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. For weeks, he hardly ate anything. He would not play with the other dogs. He wouldn't let us near him. A deep breath. And every night, he cried. My jaw tightens, because I remember now. I remember the storm, how he slipped through the fence, the agonizing hours of searching, the weeks that were supposed to be days. And then, the moment I gave up, the moment I told myself perhaps he was better off wherever he landed. And the whole time, he was here, crying, waiting. For me. I blink fast, swallowing down the fire in my throat. Does he still cry? I ask, my voice hoarse. Maggie nods. Every night. Something forms in my throat, a lump. I turn back to Charlie and clutch the rusted tag so tightly my fingers dig into my palm. I need to say something. I need to do something. But how do you even start to fix that? How do you reverse a year of neglect? How do you ask a dog, that dog that waited for you so long, to trust you again? A quaky breath escapes my lips, and then slowly, I reach for the cage latch. Maggie tenses beside me. Be careful, she warns, but I already know. Charlie hasn't allowed anyone to touch him in a year. If I open this door and he runs, that's it. That's my answer. I hold my breath, and then I push the door open. The metal creaks. Charlie flinches. His frail body tenses. For a moment, I think I've lost him, that he's about to run to the back of the cage, that I won't have this chance again. But then, he stops. The space feels frozen in time. Neither of us move. Neither of us breathe. And then, Charlie takes a step forward. Just one. Small, shaky, but toward me. My heart pounds against my ribs. I don't move. I don't push. I just let him decide. And then after what seems like forever, he leans in. His spindly, shaking body is cradled against my chest. His weight is nothing. Barely there. But to me, it's everything. Because Charlie, my Charlie, still remembers home. They say taking a dog home is easy part, that love will be enough to heal everything. But the truth? The reality is that love isn't always enough. Sometimes love isn't enough to heal or amend. It cannot take back the nights of loneliness. It cannot erase the feeling of being left behind. And then I found myself standing there, as Charlie hesitated on the threshold of the shelter. I knew I wasn't just taking him home, it was asking him to believe in home again. Maggie stands at the door with her arms crossed and watches carefully. He's scared. Her voice is soft, but there's an aware heft to it. I nod and grip the leash tighter. I know. Charlie stirs a little, the pads of his paws scraping the pavement. The road ahead is empty. No fences, no locked doors, just open space. But there's the rub, right? Charlie doesn't know how to handle open space anymore, because for so long, for so many nights, his realm was a 6x6 cage. And now I was telling him to trust that what lay beyond those doors was safe. Maggie exhales. You have to have patience with him. I let out a dry, shaky laugh. Patience isn't the problem. She tilts her head. Then what is? I swallow hard. I already know the answer. I'm scared too. A beat of silence. Maggie doesn't ask why. She doesn't need to. She sees it. The guilt. The doubt. Because what if I wasn't good enough? What if taking him home was yet another error? Charlie lowers his head and flattens his ears. He doesn't try to pull away, but he doesn't advance either, as if he is caught in duality between two worlds. The one he knows, the one that hurt him, and the one he's afraid to hope for, the one waiting for him. I take a slow breath, then I do something I haven't done in years. I kneel. I'm not sure why I do it. Perhaps because it shrinks me down, less threatening, or maybe because I want him to see I'm not standing over him. This time, I'm not leaving him behind. Charlie's ears twitch. He is watching me, his dull eyes flickering with something I can't identify. Not trust, not yet, but something close, something like comprehension. I hold a hand out, palm up, inches from his nose. I don't speak, I just wait. And then, it has been an eternity. Charlie takes a step forward. Just one. But this time, it's not shaky, it's not uncertain. It's a choice, a decision, a leap of faith. He walks nearer and the leash tightens slightly. My breath catches. He's still queasy, still uncertain, but he's moving. He's choosing to move. And that's everything. Maggie breathes out, the burden in her shoulders lightening. You did it, she murmurs. I shake my head. No. I look at Charlie, a paper-fine body beside me now, the shelter doors behind him. No, he did. They say it ends with bringing a dog home, that when they leave the shelter, once they're safe, the story is over. But that's a lie. Not because they are safe, but because they aren't dangerous. A house doesn't mean home. And sometimes, the rescue isn't the hardest part. It's all the stuff that unfolds later. The man swallows hard, eyeing Charlie from the corner of his eye. He hasn't stirred since they walked away from the shelter. Not once, not even a shift of his paws. It's as if he's preparing himself for what? For disappointment? For another goodbye? And when does it all prove to be too good to be true? A sigh escapes his lips. You don't have to be afraid, buddy. The words are soft, tentative, as if they do not yet belong in the air between them. Charlie doesn't react, doesn't flinch, doesn't acknowledge them, just stares straight ahead. He squeezes the wheel tighter. He wants to believe those words too, wants to think this is going to be easy, that Charlie will walk through that door and somehow know that this is real, that this is permanent, that this is his home. But part of him already knows. It won't be that simple. The headlights catch sight of a quaint, quiet house at the street's end. The man puts the car into park, pulling into the driveway. Charlie's breathing hitches. The car stops. The engine turns off. Silence. The man exhales, putting his hands on the wheel just for a moment. Then he turns slowly to Charlie. We're here. Charlie doesn't move. Not out of excitement, not out of curiosity. He simply retains a station, his human body so coiled that his slender composition shakes. The man's chest tightens, because this isn't the response of a dog who got a second chance. This is how a dog responds when it's been disappointed too many times. A lump forms in his throat. He opens the door and steps into the cool night air. And then, moving around to the passenger side, he opens the door to Charlie. The dog flinches, not much, just a small, semi-involuntary twitch, but it's enough. Enough for the man to remind him that trust isn't immediate, that love doesn't erase the past, that Charlie has had more time alone and afraid than he's ever had time being loved, and that right now, he doesn't see a home. He sees another cage. It would be yet another door closing behind him. The man gets down on one knee, passing a hand lightly over the seat. He doesn't reach for Charlie, doesn't force him out. He just waits, and then, softly, gently, he utters the only words that count. "You can come out as soon as you're ready." Charlie's ears twitch. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but it's something. His dim eyes flick to the man, sizing him up, looking for the lie. The moment when he understands this is just like any other making out rest stop. Another empty promise that won't stick. But the man doesn't move, doesn't rush him. And for the first time, Charlie doesn't run. Seconds stretch into minutes. His heart racing, the man stands still, and then Charlie shifts, slow, cautious. One paw, then another. His frail legs tremble when he gets out of the vehicle, the leash dangling loosely at his side. The cold pavement is unfamiliar to his paws, strange. He hesitates. The world is too big, too open, too much. But then, the man moves first. He doesn't pull the leash, doesn't force the moment. He just turns and walks towards the house. For an instant, Charlie is frozen, watching, waiting, just trying to figure out if this is real. If he follows, will the door close? Will this be another mistake? Will this be the time he gets the defeat? The man reaches the porch. He stops, turns, and waits. He doesn't call for him, doesn't force the moment. He just stands there, letting Charlie decide. Since trust is not established in commands, it's built in choices. And then, slowly, carefully, it is Charlie who takes the initial steps. They say dogs adjust quickly, that once you offer them warmth, safety, love, they settle. But that's a lie. When you've been in the dark longer than the light doesn't feel safe. It feels temporary. And while I watch Charlie and stand frozen on the threshold of my home, I knew. He didn't trust this. He didn't trust me. I crouch slowly, soft on my movements, my care. I don't reach for him, don't call his name, I just let him watch me. So he can see I'm not trying to force this, that he still has a choice. Because after everything, after all the times he's been abandoned, left behind, forgotten, this choice has to be his. Charlie's ears twitch. He takes a shaky breath. A soft glow from a lamp in the corner drapes shadows over the wooden floor, extending toward him. And that's when I see it. He hasn't moved his paws since they were in that place. There, lingering by the door. Because part of him, some of him is still preparing to run. I swallow hard. My chest tightens. I want to tell him it's okay, that he's safe now, that he no longer has to be afraid. But words won't fix this. Because trust is not something you can order a dog to have. It's something you prove. And right now, Charlie is waiting for proof, waiting to see whether this place, whether I am real, or if this is merely another stop on the journey to be discarded all over again. I exhale slowly. Then I do the only thing I know how to do. I let him be. I force myself to my feet and back away slowly. His eyes follow me wherever I go, his body as motionless as a statue. I walk over to the couch, plopping down onto it with a low sigh. Then, without a word, I wait. The minutes become an eternity. Charlie doesn't move, not at first. But I can see it in his eyes. He's thinking. He's weighing the risks, just as he has probably done thousands of times before. Because he knows what can happen when you trust too much, too soon. When you think something lasts forever, just for it to slip through your paws. Then, after what seems like an eternity, Charlie takes a step forward, just one, small, hesitant, then another. His thin legs quaver as he shuffles deeper into the house, his breaths uneven. The wood floors creak beneath his weight. He still tucks his tail, still has a guarded posture, but he's moving. He's choosing to stay. And for now, that's enough. I remain where I am, my heart racing as I watch him explore. He doesn't do the sniffing thing that any dogs do, doesn't wag his butt or display any interest. Instead, he's careful, each gesture slow, wary, as if he's charting every route out, like he's just waiting for the moment this all unravels. I watch as he walks past the coffee table, down the hall to the back where the kitchen is, and then his eyes land on something. His body freezes. I follow his gaze, and then my breath catches his old bed, still in the corner of the room, right where it used to be. A lump forms in my throat. I had never even considered it before, hadn't thought about relocating it. It had been sitting there, untouched, for more than a year. Perhaps because I couldn't quite bring myself to throw it away, perhaps because part of me never fully moved on, and now Charlie was looking at it like a ghost from his past. His paws shift, his ears flatten. For a moment I wonder whether he will bolt, might run back to the door, but then he does something I'm not expecting. He steps forward, and carefully, hesitantly, he sits on the bed. I exhale an unsteady breath. He doesn't curl up, doesn't relax. Not yet. But he lays down, and that's more than enough. My moment afraid to break stay still. His body remains tense. His eyes remain open, but he's not standing, not pacing, not looking for the door. He's here. Even if he doesn't yet believe it, even if he still believes this may not hold, he's trying. And that's everything. Once a dog comes home, they say the hardest part is behind. That once they're safe, once they're warm, once they're loved, the fear fades. But that's a lie, because fear is not life in the bright. It lives in the dark, it waits in the quiet. And for a dog like Charlie, a nightly cries himself to sleep kennel dog. Alone? The fear never really left. It just learned how to wait. The man shifts his elbows on his knees. He's watching closely, though he's careful not to let on. Charlie hasn't budged much since he settled down. But there is something about the way he is hunched, his body tucked too tight, as his ears perk up at every sound outside. That tells him the truth. Charlie isn't resting. Charlie is bracing. The man swallows hard. He should have known it wouldn't be easy. That getting Charlie home was not the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. Because for him, this isn't home right now. At this point, this is just another spot to desert. A heavy sigh leaves his lips. He leans back, a hand running down his face. His body is fatigued, yet his mind is too wired, too engrossed in the quiet battle taking place on the opposite side of the room. Charlie could be in this house, but he's still waiting. Waiting for when the door opens again, waiting for the day it all goes away, waiting for the time he's forsaken. Again, midnight drags in slowly. Outside, dark, still, the TV hums quietly to itself, the flickerishing light of its screen casting moving shadows on the walls. The man breathes in, hoofs himself up. His body is rigid, his limbs achy. He pauses for a second, then switches off the TV. The house falls to darkness, the only thing illuminating now the street lamp outside. And that's when he hears it. A sound so minor, so delicate, he nearly misses it. A whimper. His chest tightens. He turns slowly. Charlie is curled in his bed, But now his body is shaking. His paws move a little, as if he's running in a dream. A fractured, muffled noise comes up through his throat, a noise that should not emit from a dog who is, at last, safe. That's a dream, not a fantasy. This is a memory. The man advances toward him, his throat tight with breath. Charlie flinches, not awake, not aware, just lost, and stuck in the place where the past is still his master. And the worst part? He isn't even screaming for help. He's just whimpering, like he's already resigned to the lack of response, like he's keeping vigil in that cage, in the dark, alone. And even now, even here, he still doesn't believe someone is listening. The man kneels next to him, lingering. He doesn't want to scare him, does not want to make things worse. Choosing the course of action, he does the only thing he can think. He whispers, "Hey, buddy." His voice is quiet, careful. Charlie doesn't react. Not right away. So he tries again. "Charlie, it's okay." Charlie stirs. His ears flick. His breath hitches. Then slowly, his listless, tired eyes fluttered open. The man does not move. He hardly breathes. Charlie stands still for a long moment, just stares, lost, confused, like he doesn't know where he's at, as if he doesn't know this place, as if he's still rising in a cage, still waking up in the cold, waiting for morning, to be disappointed, for nothing to change. Then his eyes focus, and they land on him, on the man who knelt next to him, and something shifts. Charlie's body doesn't relax. His muscles stay tense, but his breathing evens just slightly, as if he is reminding himself of where he is, like he's remembering that the dark is different here, that maybe, just maybe, he's not alone this time. The man swallows. "You okay, buddy?" It's a stupid question. Charlie isn't okay, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But the important part? He's here. He survived another night. And this time, when he woke up in the dark, someone was there. They say it takes time to heal. This isn't something you build overnight. But sometimes, it doesn't need a big moment. It doesn't require a grand gesture. Sometimes all it takes is just to stay. And as I sat there, back aching from the night, my coffee cold in my hands, I knew last night wasn't a victory. It wasn't a miracle, but it was something. And for Charlie, that was more than enough. The wall clock ticks softly on its wall. Outside, the world stirs awake. Charlie wiggles a little bit in his bed, his ears readjusting to his body. For a moment, I wonder if he's dreaming, if he's back in that cage. Whether, when he wakes up, he won't know where he is. Never mind that this place is unlike any other. Forget that someone stayed this time. Then his eyes flicker open, just barely, just enough to allow morning light in. His body seizes for a moment, his breath catching, and I hold mine, waiting, hoping. But then, he doesn't panic. He doesn't glance nervously around the room, looking for the bars. He doesn't fold himself in half like he's disappearing. He just looks at me. My throat tightens. It's such a small thing, just a glance, just a passing, fleeting spark of recognition. But I know what it means. It means so that this is the first time in a long time. Charlie woke up without fear. I quietly breathe out, tiptoeing through the possibilities. "Morning, buddy." My voice is hoarse from sleep. Charlie blinks, and then, so subtle, I almost don't catch it. His tail twitches, just once. A small, hesitant movement. Not excitement, not joy, but something close, something like acknowledgement. My chest tightens. I don't move, don't push. I just sit there, allowing the moment to be, allowing Charlie to deal with it in his own way. Because this isn't about me, it's about him. It's about allowing him to make the determination of whether this is real, if I'm real, if this home, if he belongs here. Charlie moves again, his thin body stretching somewhat. He takes a soft breath in, his ribs expanding and collapsing in slow, measured time, and then he does something I'm not on the lookout for. He closes his eyes again. My breath catches. It's small, subtle, but it means everything. Because Charlie wasn't waking up and panicking. He didn't wake up and flinch away. He saw me and returned to sleep. Which means, in the spine of its being, deep down, he no longer feels like he has to be afraid. Not this morning, not right now, and that's the first breakthrough. I rub my face, fatigue setting in. The previous night sits thick in my bones. But I don't care, because today is different. Today, Charlie made a choice. Not a big one, not a loud, obvious one, but a choice that mattered. A decision to drop his guard, however briefly. I stand up, stretching out the stiffness in my legs. Charlie doesn't react. He does not move, just breathes, slowly, deeply. And as I enter the kitchen, I allow myself a smile. Because today marks the first time in 365 nights. Charlie didn't wake up and cry. They say the difficult task is done once a dog begins to trust you, that after the first breakthrough, all else falls into place. But the truth is, trust isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 little ones. And it takes just one misstep, one reminder of the past, to lose everything. Charlie stirs, his paws digging into the fabric of his bed as he stretches. His movements are sluggish, tentative, not because he's in pain, but because he's pushing the limits around him, testing the air, testing me, waiting to see whether something has changed. If I'm not the same person I was yesterday, if this place is still safe, I remain where I am, drinking my coffee, not pushing, not calling him, just waiting, allowing him to define what today looks like. And then, something happens, something small, something very nearly invisible. Charlie's nose twitches, his gaze darts to the kitchen, and then, for the first time since returning home, he stands up on his own. My breath catches. He doesn't move right away. He just stands there, thin legs quivering slightly, his ribs just visible beneath his dull fur. It's the first time I've actually seen him on his feet since he came in that door. And as I look down at him, I suddenly understand just how little he is, how fragile, how much weight he's lost, how much more of him there is to find. He looks around, ears flicking at every minor sound. Then, slowly, carefully, he takes a step, not toward the door, not away from me, just forward. A constriction I didn't even know I was holding in my chest loosens up a bit. Charlie doesn't walk far, doesn't rush into the room, but he moves. He chooses to move, and that's all I could ever have wished for. I set my cup down and keep my voice low. "Good morning, buddy." Charlie's ears flick, and then the slight, tentative wag of his tail, not a wag, not excitement, but something close. Something like understanding, like maybe, just maybe, this place isn't a cage after all. I let out a slow breath. "Are you hungry?" A beat of silence. Then, Charlie tilts his head. It's so small, so normal, but when I see it I feel my chest tighten. Because after everything, after the fear, the waiting, the hesitation, that slight movement may be the closest thing to curiosity I've seen in him. And curiosity here has significance, meaning he wants to see what comes next. It means he wants to stay. I walk slow, putting my coffee down before I take a step toward the cabinet. Charlie's muscles tense. His paws shuffle slightly, but he doesn't bolt. He watches, waiting, measuring every movement. I take out the bag of food, pouring it into his bowl. It is loud in the still house. Charlie flinches, but then his nose twitches again. He glances at the bowl with his eyes. There's something in his gaze now, and something I've never seen before. Hunger, real hunger. Not the kind that burrows in your gut, but the type that results from hope. I step back. Charlie watches me. Then he shuffles his paws forward slowly, one step, then another, and then he's in front of the bowl. A lump rises in my throat. He pauses for a split second longer, then he lowers his head and takes a bite. My breath comes out of me all at once, because this is not just eating. This isn't just hunger. This is acceptance. A small one, a hesitant one, but real. Because for the first time, Charlie is not simply surviving. He's choosing to live. Dogs, they say, know their home, that it honestly just clicks at some point. But that wasn't just a moment for Charlie. It was 100 little ones. The first time he hadn't woken up in tears. The first morning he allowed himself to sleep. It was the first meal I had eaten because I wanted to, not because I had to. The first time he took a step toward me, not out of fear, not that I was calling him, but because he wanted to be with me. And today, something's different. Because today, Charlie is not just there. Today, he feels like he's here to stay. In the kitchen, I watch him carefully, my fingers on my coffee mug. Charlie shifts, stretching his spindly legs, his ribs still faintly visible under his fur. He looks better, not healed, not completely whole, but better. And that's enough. Then something happens, something I wasn't expecting. Charlie lifts his head. His tired eyes move around the room, flicking toward me. And then, for the first time since he walked through that door, he gets up and walks towards me. Not hesitantly, not cautiously. It's not like he's probing the space around him, but like a dog who wants to stay close to his person, like a dog who finally gets it, like a dog who is home. I feel my breath catch. I don't move, don't speak. I just let him come to me. And when he gets to my side, stopping just short, he leans in. It's small, barely a touch. But this is the first time Charlie has come of his own accord to press against me. The first time he's allowed himself to target comfort rather than having to wait for it to be taken from him. And my heart clenches, because this is it. This is the part I've been looking forward to. Not when he walked through the door, not when he first walked in the house, but this, the moment he chose me, the moment he realized, and it wasn't a doubt, that he was finally home. I breathe out, bringing my hand down gradually, giving him time, giving him choice. But Charlie doesn't hesitate. He finally leans into my touch. His thin body pressed against my leg. His weight, so small, so fragile, resting on me. And then suddenly, as if something inside him finally loosens, his tail wags. A soft, slow movement, not forced, not hesitant. Not that he believes he must, but because he wants to, because he knows. This time, it's real. He never was my shelter dog. He was always waiting home. And now, he has finally discovered it. That was the ending Charlie really earned. He wasn't just saved. He regained his faith in love. If Charlie's story resonated with you, pass it along to someone who needs to hear it, because somewhere another dog is still waiting for their second chance. And sometimes, It only takes one who is willing to remain. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, take care.